I never thought I'd be the kind of mother who would have to track down her own child like a detective. But when your 16-year-old son goes missing in the Colorado wilderness because your own family left him there to die, you learn things about yourself you never wanted to know. It started 3 weeks before Labor Day. My mother called me on a Tuesday evening while I was making dinner. Mom rarely called during the week anymore. Not since Dad passed 2 years ago and the whole inheritance mess started bubbling under the surface. So when her name lit up my phone screen, I knew something was up. "Rebecca, honey," she said in that voice she used when she wanted something. "I was thinking it might be nice if Tyler came up to the cabin with me and Linda this weekend. You know, some quality grandparent time before school starts." Tyler was washing dishes next to me, his brown hair falling into his eyes the way it always did when he concentrated. He'd grown 3 inches over the summer and was all elbows and knees trying to figure out how to fit into his new body. At 16, he was at that age where family time wasn't exactly his first choice, but he'd always had a soft spot for my mom. "That sounds nice, Mom," I said, watching Tyler's face light up when I mentioned the cabin. "When were you thinking?" "This Friday through Sunday. Linda's driving up from Denver, and we thought we could do some hiking. Maybe teach Tyler how to fish properly. Your father always said that boy needed to learn the mountains." The mention of my father made my chest tighten, the way it always did. Dad had loved that cabin in the San Juan National Forest. He'd bought it back in 1987 with money from his construction business, a little two-bedroom place about 20 miles outside of Pagosa Springs. It wasn't fancy, but it had a view of the mountains that could make you forget every problem you'd ever had. What Mom didn't mention, and what I was trying not to think about, was that the cabin was at the center of our family's growing tension. Dad's will had been specific about wanting the property to eventually go to Tyler when he turned 21, with me managing it until then. But Linda, my older sister, had been making noise about contesting the will. She claimed Dad had promised her the cabin years ago, before Tyler was born. "Tyler would love that," I told Mom, and I meant it. Despite everything else, I wanted my son to have good memories of his grandmother and aunt. Family was still family, even when things got complicated. Tyler grabbed the phone from me with that grin that reminded me so much of his father. "Grandma Ruth? Yeah, I'd love to come up. Can I bring my camera? I want to get some shots of those aspen trees you showed me last time." I listened to him chat with my mother for a few more minutes, making plans about what to pack and what time Linda would pick him up Friday afternoon. Something felt off about the whole conversation, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Maybe it was just my own paranoia after months of tension about Dad's estate. Friday came faster than I expected. I spent the morning helping Tyler pack his backpack with extra layers, his emergency whistle, and the GPS watch I'd bought him for his birthday. The watch had been my compromise between giving him independence and keeping him safe. It had an emergency contact feature that would send me his location if he pressed the button for more than 5 seconds. "Mom, you're being weird," Tyler said, as I double-checked his first aid kit for the third time. "It's just Grandma and Aunt Linda. I've been hiking with them before." "I know, sweetheart. I just want to make sure you have everything you need." But even as I said it, I felt that nagging worry in my stomach. Tyler had been hiking with Mom and Linda before, but always with other family members around. Never just the three of them, and never for a whole weekend. Linda arrived at 2:30 in her white Toyota Highlander, honking twice from the driveway. She came to the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, gave me a quick hug and helped Tyler load his gear into the back of her car. "We'll take good care of him," she said. But something about the way she said it made me feel cold. I watched them drive away and tried to shake the feeling that I'd just made a terrible mistake. Saturday morning, I woke up with an anxiety I couldn't explain. I tried to distract myself with housework, but every little task felt pointless. By noon, I was checking my phone every few minutes, even though I knew Tyler probably wouldn't have signal up at the cabin. That's when the first text came in. It was from Tyler's emergency watch, just a location ping showing he was about 15 miles northeast of the cabin, up in the forest. The timestamp said 11:47 a.m. I figured they'd gone for their hike and Tyler was just testing out the GPS feature. But then at 2:15 p.m., another ping came through. Same general area, no movement for over 2 hours. That was strange. Tyler was always moving when he was hiking, taking pictures, exploring. He wouldn't sit still in one spot for that long, unless something was wrong. I tried calling his regular cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. No surprise there, cell service was spotty in the mountains. I tried calling Mom's phone, then Linda's. Both went to voicemail. By 4 p.m. I was starting to panic. 3 more location pings had come through from Tyler's watch, all from the exact same coordinates. No movement at all. I pulled up the GPS location on my computer and used satellite imagery to see where he was. It showed a heavily forested area about half a mile from any marked trail. That's when my phone rang with a call from Tyler's emergency contact line. "Mom?" Tyler's voice was thin and scared. "Mom, I need help." "Tyler, honey, what's wrong? Where are you?" "I'm lost, Mom. We were hiking, and they said they needed to rest. So I went ahead to take some pictures of this waterfall I could hear. When I came back, they were gone. My backpack is gone too. All my water, my snacks, everything." My blood turned to ice. "What do you mean they were gone?" "I mean they left me, Mom. I've been looking for them for hours. I tried to follow the trail back, but I think I went the wrong way. It's getting dark and it's starting to rain." I could hear the fear in his voice, but also something else. Confusion, like he couldn't quite believe what had happened to him. "Okay, sweetheart, stay calm. I'm looking at your GPS location right now. Stay exactly where you are, don't move. I'm coming to get you." "But Mom, I don't understand why they would leave me. Grandma wouldn't do that. Maybe they went back to get help." I didn't want to tell him what I was already starting to suspect. Instead, I told him to find shelter, to conserve his body heat, and to keep his phone close in case I needed to call him back. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for exactly 30 seconds, letting the rage build in my chest. Then I started making calls. First, I called the Archuleta County Sheriff's Office and reported Tyler missing. I gave them his GPS coordinates and explained the situation. The dispatcher was professional, but concerned, especially when I mentioned that his hiking companions had apparently left him behind. "Ma'am, we're going to send a search and rescue team to those coordinates right away. Can you give me the names and phone numbers of the people he was hiking with?" I gave them Mom's and Linda's information, then asked if I should drive up there myself. "We'd prefer if you stayed reachable by phone for now, ma'am. Our team knows this area well, and they'll be able to get to your son faster than you could. We'll call you as soon as we have him." After I hung up with the sheriff, I tried calling Mom and Linda again. Still no answer. But this time, instead of just leaving voicemails, I started paying attention to the details. When I called Mom's phone, I could hear background noise before it went to voicemail. Music, conversation, like she was somewhere public, somewhere with cell service. I called Linda's phone and got the same thing. Background noise, then voicemail. They weren't unreachable. They were ignoring my calls. That's when I started taking screenshots. Screenshots of Tyler's GPS pings, showing he'd been in the same location for hours. Screenshots of my call log, showing multiple attempted calls to Mom and Linda. Screenshots of the weather alerts I was getting on my phone. Warning of severe thunderstorms in the San Juan National Forest. I've always been organized, maybe obsessively so. It served me well as a paralegal, and it was about to serve me even better as a mother, whose son had been abandoned in the wilderness. While I waited for news from the search and rescue team, I started digging into something that had been bothering me for months. The inheritance dispute wasn't just about the cabin. Dad had been smart with his money, and there was a substantial life insurance policy that would be split between me and Linda. But there was a clause in the policy that I'd never paid much attention to before. If Tyler died before his 21st birthday, his portion of the inheritance would revert to the remaining beneficiaries. I pulled out the policy documents and read through them again, this time with a lawyer's eye for detail. The numbers were significant. If Tyler wasn't around to inherit the cabin and his portion of the life insurance, Linda's share would increase by almost $400,000. My hands were shaking as I realized what I was looking at. This wasn't just family drama over a cabin. This was a financial motive for getting my son out of the picture. At 8:47 p.m., my phone rang. It was the Archuleta County Sheriff. "Mrs. Morrison, we found your son. He's safe." I started crying before he finished the sentence. "He's dehydrated and pretty shaken up, but he's okay. We're taking him to Pagosa Springs Medical Center to get checked out. You can meet us there." I made the 2-hour drive to Pagosa Springs in an hour and a half, breaking every speed limit and not caring. When I got to the hospital, Tyler was sitting up in a bed in the emergency room with an IV in his arm, looking small and tired but alive. "Mom," he said when he saw me, and I held him like I hadn't since he was little. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry this happened to you. The ranger said Grandma and Aunt Linda told them I decided to stay in town with some friends instead of hiking. They said I changed my mind at the last minute. I felt that cold rage settle in my chest again. What exactly did they tell you when you got separated? Tyler looked confused. That's the weird thing, Mom. We were hiking up to Bear Creek Falls and Aunt Linda said she was tired and needed to rest. She told me to go ahead and take pictures of the waterfall, and they'd catch up. But when I came back, they weren't just gone. Their backpacks were gone too, like they'd never been there. How long were you gone? Maybe 20 minutes. I took a bunch of pictures and tried to get some video of the waterfall. When I came back to where we'd been sitting, there wasn't even any sign they'd been there. No footprints, no water bottle rings in the dirt. Nothing. A nurse came in to check Tyler's IV, and I stepped out into the hallway to make some phone calls. First, I called the sheriff's office back and asked to speak to whoever had handled Tyler's case. This is Deputy Martinez. I was part of the search team that found your son. Deputy Martinez, I need to ask you about the people who reported him missing. My mother and sister. What exactly did they tell you? There was a pause. Ma'am, they didn't report him missing. When we contacted them after you called us, they said your son had decided not to go hiking and was staying in town. They seemed surprised that you thought he was lost. They left him in the forest on purpose, Deputy Martinez. He had no water, no food, no shelter. There's a storm system moving through that area tonight. Ma'am, those are serious allegations. Do you have any evidence to support that? I thought about the GPS pings, the ignored phone calls, the timing of everything. Yes, I do. And I think this might be about more than just a hiking accident. Deputy Martinez was quiet for a moment. Why don't you come down to the station tomorrow morning? Bring whatever evidence you have, and we'll take a formal statement. After Tyler was discharged from the hospital, we drove to a hotel in Pagosa Springs for the night. I didn't trust myself to make the drive home in the dark, and I wanted to be close to the sheriff's office in the morning. Tyler fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from his ordeal. I sat by the window, looking out at the mountains, and thinking about everything that had happened. My phone kept buzzing with missed calls from Mom and Linda, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hear their lies yet. Instead, I spent the night going through my phone, my emails, and every document I could find related to Dad's estate. I was building a case, the way I'd learned to do in my job as a paralegal. Every piece of evidence mattered. Every detail could make the difference between justice and letting them get away with what they'd done. Sunday morning, I drove Tyler back to Denver and left him with my ex-husband, Mark. I didn't tell Tyler what I suspected about his grandmother and aunt. He was confused and hurt enough already. But I told Mark everything. Jesus, Rebecca, Mark said when I finished explaining. Your own mother? I don't want to believe it either, but the evidence is pretty clear. Mark shook his head. What do you need from me? Just keep Tyler safe. And if anything happens to me, make sure people know what I've told you. I drove back to Pagosa Springs that afternoon and spent 2 hours at the sheriff's office, going through everything with Deputy Martinez and Detective Sarah Coleman. I showed them the GPS data, the call logs, the weather alerts, and the insurance documents. Detective Coleman was particularly interested in the inheritance angle. This would give your sister significant financial motivation, she said, and the timing is suspicious. They chose a weekend with severe weather in the forecast. What happens now? I asked. We investigate. We'll interview your mother and sister, examine the physical evidence from the hiking trail, and see if we can build a case. This could be attempted murder, depending on what we find. I drove home that night, feeling like I was living in a nightmare. My own mother and sister had tried to kill my son for money. It was so surreal that part of me kept hoping I was wrong, that there was some other explanation, but the evidence didn't lie. Over the next 2 weeks, the investigation moved forward. Detective Coleman called me with updates every few days. They'd found the spot where Tyler had been abandoned, and the physical evidence supported his story. There were signs that multiple people had been there, then signs that 2 people had left in a different direction than Tyler had gone. They'd also recovered some interesting evidence from Linda's car. Mud on the floor mats that matched the soil composition from the trail. but not from the official parking area. She'd parked somewhere off the main road, somewhere she shouldn't have been if they'd really been planning to meet Tyler in town. The most damning evidence came from their cell phone. Both Mom and Linda had been active on social media throughout the time they claimed to be hiking with Tyler. Instagram posts, Facebook comments, location data that put them nowhere near the forest when Tyler was lost. 3 weeks after Tyler's rescue, Detective Coleman called me with news I'd been both hoping for and dreading. "We're filing charges against your mother and sister. Attempted murder, child endangerment, and conspiracy. The district attorney feels we have a strong case." The next few months were the hardest of my life. The story made local news, and then regional news, and then it seemed like everyone in Colorado was talking about the grandmother and aunt who'd tried to kill a teenager for inheritance money. Mom and Linda hired expensive lawyers and maintained their innocence. They claimed Tyler had gotten lost on his own, that they'd searched for him for hours before giving up and assuming he'd made it back to town safely. They said I was making up the inheritance motive because I was greedy and wanted to keep them from getting their fair share of Dad's estate. But the evidence spoke louder than their lies. Tyler had to testify, which was almost as hard as the original abandonment. He was scared and confused, still not wanting to believe that his grandmother would hurt him on purpose. But he told the truth about what had happened, and his testimony was powerful. The trial lasted 8 days. I sat in that courtroom every single day, watching my mother and sister's faces, as witness after witness testified about their guilt. The GPS evidence, the cell phone data, the weather reports, the insurance documents, it all painted a clear picture of premeditation. The most emotional moment came when the prosecutor played a recording of Tyler's emergency call to me from the forest. You could hear the fear in his voice, the confusion, the disbelief that his family had abandoned him. Several jurors were crying by the time it finished. Mom's lawyer tried to argue that the whole thing was a misunderstanding, that Tyler had gotten separated from them accidentally, but he couldn't explain away the evidence. He couldn't explain why they'd told different stories to different people, why they'd ignored my phone calls, why they'd been active on social media when they claimed to be searching for Tyler. Linda's lawyer took a different approach, trying to paint me as the villain. He suggested that I'd coached Tyler to lie, that I was motivated by greed and had made up the whole story to get full control of Dad's inheritance. But that strategy backfired. When Detective Coleman testified about the physical evidence from the trail, there was no way Tyler could have faked being abandoned in that location. No way I could have orchestrated the weather patterns that had put him in danger. On a Thursday afternoon in March, the jury delivered their verdict, guilty on all counts. I watched my mother's face when the foreman read the verdict. For just a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Not remorse, not shame, but anger. She was angry that she'd been caught. Linda broke down crying, but even her tears felt calculated. She'd always been good at manipulating people's emotions. During the sentencing phase, I was allowed to give a victim impact statement. I'd written it and rewritten it dozens of times, trying to find the right words to explain what they'd done to Tyler, to our family, to my faith in the people who were supposed to love us most. In the end, I kept it simple. Your Honor, my mother and sister didn't just try to kill my son for money. They broke something fundamental about what family means. Tyler will never be able to trust people the same way again. He'll always wonder if the people who claim to love him might hurt him if the price is right. That's a wound that doesn't heal. I looked at Mom and Linda when I said it, but neither of them would meet my eyes. But Tyler is alive, and he's strong, and he's learned something important about the difference between people who love you and people who just claim to. We've both learned that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up for you when everything goes wrong. The judge sentenced Mom to 12 years in prison and Linda to 15. The difference reflecting Linda's role as the primary planner. They were also ordered to pay restitution for Tyler's medical expenses and the cost of the search and rescue operation. As the bailiffs led them away in handcuffs, Mom finally looked at me. I expected to see remorse, or sadness, or even anger. Instead, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. I saw calculation. Even now, even after everything, she was still thinking about angles, still looking for a way to turn the situation to her advantage. That was the moment I truly understood who my mother really was. Tyler and I drove home from the courthouse in silence. He was 18 now, had started college, was building a life that didn't revolve around the trauma of what had happened to him in those Colorado mountains. But I knew he was still processing everything, still trying to understand how the people who were supposed to protect him had been willing to let him die for money. "Mom," he said, as we pulled into our driveway, "do you think they would have actually let me die?" It was a question he'd asked me before, and one I'd always struggled to answer honestly. "I think they convinced themselves that someone would find you in time," I said. "I think they told themselves they weren't really trying to kill you, just put you in danger and hope for the best." But Tyler, the result would have been the same if that storm had been worse, if the search and rescue team had been delayed, if any number of things had gone wrong. He nodded, staring out at the mountains, visible from our front yard. "I still miss Grandpa." "Me too, sweetheart. But I think he would be proud of how you handled everything. And I think he'd be glad to know that the people who tried to hurt you are being held accountable." That night, I sat in my kitchen with a glass of wine and thought about everything that had led us to this point. Dad's death, the inheritance disputes, the years of subtle favoritism and manipulation that I'd chosen to ignore because I wanted to believe in family. I pulled out my phone and looked at the pictures Tyler had taken during his last normal weekend with Mom and Linda before everything went wrong. He'd sent them to me from the cabin, proud of his photography skills. There was one of Mom and Linda sitting by the fireplace, smiling at the camera like loving family members. But now, looking at it with everything I knew, I could see something different in their expression, something calculating and cold that I'd missed before. I deleted the photos. Some memories aren't worth keeping. 6 months later, Tyler and I took a camping trip to the San Juan National Forest. Not to the same trails where he'd been abandoned, but to a different area, one with happy memories attached. We hiked during the day and sat by the campfire at night, talking about college and his plans for the future. On our last night, as we were watching the stars come out over the mountains, Tyler said something that made me realize he was going to be okay. "You know what's weird, Mom? I'm not angry anymore. I mean, I was for a long time, but now I just feel sorry for them. They gave up having a grandson, having a daughter, having a family, all for money they'll never get to spend. That's gotta be the worst trade in history." I looked at my son, 19 years old now and wiser than he should have had to be, and felt proud of the man he was becoming despite everything that had been done to him. "Your grandfather would have said the same thing," I told him. "Yeah," Tyler said, poking at the fire with a stick. "I think he would have." The next morning, we packed up our campsite and drove home to Denver. Tyler had classes starting the next week, and I had work to catch up on. Normal life, ordinary problems, the kind of simple challenges that seem like gifts when you've been through something that tests everything you thought you knew about the people you love. I still think about that weekend sometimes, about the phone call that changed everything, about the moment I realized that my own mother was capable of letting my child die for money. But mostly I think about Tyler's voice on that emergency call, scared but not broken, asking for help and trusting that I would come for him, because that's what real family does. Real family shows up when everything goes wrong. Real family doesn't abandon you in the wilderness and hope for the best. 3 years later, I got a letter from Mom in prison. She wanted to see Tyler, wanted a chance to explain herself, wanted us to understand that she'd never meant for him to get hurt. I read the letter twice, then put it in the shredder. Some people don't deserve second chances, some betrayals are too deep to forgive, and some family members are family in name only. People who share your blood but not your values, your love, or your basic humanity. Tyler is 21 now, officially old enough to inherit the cabin that started this whole nightmare. We've talked about what to do with it. Part of me wants to sell it, to get rid of the reminder of everything that happened. But Tyler wants to keep it, wants to make new memories there, wants to reclaim it from the people who tried to use it as a weapon against him. I think his grandfather would approve of that decision. Last month, Tyler graduated from college with a degree in environmental science. He wants to work in forest conservation, wants to help protect the places that almost became his grave. At his graduation party, surrounded by friends who've become his chosen family, he gave a speech about resilience and growth, and finding beauty in the places that once scared you. I watched him speak and thought about how far we'd both come from that terrible weekend, when a GPS alert changed everything. We'd learned hard lessons about trust and betrayal, about the difference between people who love you and people who just claimed. But we'd also learned about our own strength, about the power of truth and evidence, and refusing to let other people's lies become your reality. Tyler still wears the GPS watch I bought him for his 16th birthday, not because he needs the emergency features anymore, but because it reminds him that no matter where he goes, no matter what happens, someone who really loves him is always paying attention, always ready to come find him if he gets lost. That's what real family does. Real family doesn't abandon you in the wilderness and hope someone else will save you. Real family comes looking for you themselves.